There's a principle with games that I don't think gets quite enough attention, being the structural difference in how a video game as a medium is allowed to interact with its audience. There exists no other medium that understands its place as a medium that a text exists in. Because games have a kinetic and evolving nature, there's a lot of ways to interact with the audience that commonly go unexplored. Literature, film, and storytelling all have a distinct way in which you interact with a text. You can read, watch, listen, or put it down. None of these mediums have the ability to really interact with what the subject wants or expects. Video games can transcend this barrier, and Metal Gear Solid specifically employs maybe the best use of this idea ever, cutting through the narrative of a game and reaching through the screen and locking onto what the player wants and fears. In the back end of the game, there's a torture sequence where Snake is captured and asked to give up the location of his romantic interest Meryl. A game ensues where you're asked to press a button repeatedly to avoid dying, all quite standard. This for me though isn't really torture, it's a test of how quickly I can press this button. I'm still sitting in my pajamas, comfortable. Snake is being tortured. The narrative and kinetic elements of this scene are completely isolated. Snake is being tortured, and I am watching Snake being tortured. That's my experience as the player thus far. Now, right before the game, watch how Ocelot addresses the player and pulls them in with Snake.
We're going to play a game, Snake, and we'll find out what kind of man you really are. When the pain becomes too great to bear, just give up and your suffering will end. But if you do, the girl's life is mine. Press the circle button repeatedly to regain your strength. When you've had enough, press the select button to submit. When your life reaches 0, the game is over. There are no continues, my friend. Don't even think about using auto-fire, or I'll know. Snake, it's been a long time since you saved your game.
Yeah? So what?
If your body can't survive the torture, it'll be game over. You really want to travel down that long road again? Come on, I won't tell. Why don't you just give up?
Suddenly, after this development, I'm being tortured. I'm simultaneously far more interested in the outcome and less focused on the narrative because I haven't saved in hours. The fate of Meryl means nothing in the face of going back 4 whole hours of gameplay. On harder difficulties, this minigame is quite hard, and I personally sold her out as soon as I had to. I was truly frightened and worked up. I wasn't worried about getting another ending, I just didn't want to go back 4 hours. Metal Gear Solid tortured me. It made me sell out an ally, not through any narrative, but by taking apart the rules of a text and how the text is allowed to interact with me. Breath of the Wild employs the other side of this in a way that seems to understand what the player wants rather than what they fear. The Zora domain was the first place I went to after completing the plateau, and this area is plagued quite heavily by rainfall, due to the divine beast Varuta. So begins this quest. Varuta is one of the 4 divine beasts and is an important pillar in the narrative Breath of the Wild. The Zora people are engaging and the quest is fairly fun, but overall I wouldn't have been as engaged in this quest if it was a standard Zelda quest where you're asked to step in and help somebody because that's what heroes do. Breath of the Wild isn't really a game about helping people. It's about climbing and gliding and finding Korok seeds. And this is exactly why Zora's domain is so clever. To be able to climb at all, you have to stop the rain, which is making surfaces too wet to cling onto. Now your goal to explore and climb lines up exactly with where the text wants you to be. The same principle applies to Goron City, where you have to further the quest using the Divine Beast in order to enter the volcano, which is one of the most interesting features of the entire map. The means by which Breath of the Wild align its narrative identity and mechanical identity furthers the game without having to be coercive or changing its fundamental substance. Completing the Varuta quest gives you more access to what the game is about, exploring. The incentive doesn't really lie with checking off a box, fighting a boss, getting a new power, or completing the quest, though all of those things do happen. A huge incentive is just being able to climb and explore this beautiful new area. And in completing the quest, you're given more ways to explore, like with the Zora armor, which lets you scale waterfalls, making climbing these tall Zora peaks so easy and fun. The medium of a video game is still relatively young, but AAA games seem to lean towards acting like movies. Maybe movies where you get to make a few choices and can earn trophies, but movies nevertheless. If games were able to take advantage of their seat next to the player, we would have more Metal Gears, and Breath of the Wilds, and a more matured and varied medium. Thank you very much for watching. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to finish playing Breath of the Wild.